message, and it's about my uncle who came to my house one night in the middle of the night, probably 2, 3 in the morning, and this is when where I was young. I was just in high school, and so it's my mother's house, and we have myself and all my siblings were living at home still at the time, and he had come in the middle of the night. My uncle did, and he just knocking on the window. Knocking, so much that it broke the window. And so our room, mine and my brother's room, we're in the garage. Come on, I know some of you don't know what it's like, where you have to make your garage into a room. But we had to make our garage in a room. Otherwise, we 3 of us boys were going to be cramped in one little room. But anyway, so we had the garage, and I was sleeping in there. And so the window he was knocking at was right next to the garage, and I could hear it. And for some reason, I knew exactly who it was. It was weird. I didn't hear his voice or anything. I just knew who it was. And while I was laying there, because he woke me up, while I was laying there, I was getting angry in the Lord. I was getting frustrated I was getting Holy Ghost anger. Really, because I wasn't necessarily mad at him. I was more mad at the devil. And I was just saying, devil, why are you coming to my house in the middle of the night, trying to bother us and wake us up and whoop-de-woo, right? And so I knew who it was. I could hear, I think it was my mother that let him in, and I could hear her like complaining already, like, what are you doing? Woo, right? And so I hear him going, this commotion, and I just said, that's it, boom. I ripped the blankets off of me. I got up like if I was, He-Man and all that stuff. And then so my mom and I believe my brother was already there at the time. They were like in the middle of the living room, between the living room and family room, or dining room, family room, and so they were just commotion, right? And I just opened the door, and I was just like, devil! Literally, I screaming at the top of my lungs, 2, 3 in the morning. I'm probably 15 years old. Devil! Get out of my house. What are you doing in my house? Basically, I began to shout, not at my uncle, but at the devil. I began to shout at him. And I began to curse him and to demand that he leaves my house. And so, I'm not going to get into the story again, but just basically, the demons left because he was loaded on PCP. He fell to the ground, started slivering, all that stuff. But he became, he was no longer drugged. And, I'll say about 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes into it, he was no longer drugged. And he was just on the ground like, all right. Because my mom had him, straddled him, right? It was weird. And he was just like calm and collected at that point. And then, or he began to calm down. But anyways, he told me later that when I came in, he didn't see me. He seen angels. He said he's seen a big, big angel. And he was like, what the heck, And he was telling me this like probably a year after. And he didn't see me. He seen angels, an angel. And so, you'll understand why I'm saying this in a moment. But basically, he's seen God come through because I was not yelling at him. I was yelling at the devil. I was shouting, right? So Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 1, it says, "Hear, O Israel, you are now about to cross the Jordan to go and dispose nation greater and stronger than you. You're about to go in and defeat some nations that are greater and stronger than you, with large cities that have walls up to the sky." So these are larger cities, and they were fortified. They had walls, right? They had barriers between the people and the people inside the city, the people outside the city and the people inside the city. There was a wall, barrier. Verse 2, "The people are strong and tall, Anakites," right? They're tall and strong. You know about them and have heard it said, right? So everybody heard about the Anakites. They knew who the Anakites were. And it was said of them, who could stand up against the Anakites? Who is it that could come against them? A, they got fortified walls. B, they're strong. C, they're tall. They're big. right? They're strong, big, and tall. Who could stand up to the Anakites? Verse 3. But be assured today that the Lord your God, be assured today that the Lord your God, be assured that God, right? That God is the one who goes ahead of you. Like a devouring what? Fire. Like a devouring fire. Remember last week I talked about fire. But he says, don't trip because I will go before you. Right? I will go before you and I will devour them like fire. Like with fire. Right? I will devour them. Like a devouring fire. He will destroy them. He will subdue them before you. Right? God will destroy them and he will subdue them before you. And you will drive them out of and annihilate them quickly as the Lord had promised you. So you would tear them up. You're going to just basically rid them because I'm with you, right? And I will go before you. Now, I wonder how many people here this morning, you're facing an Anakite. You're facing a giant. You're facing a stronghold. You're facing something that is beyond your ability to defeat, right? It's beyond your ability to come against it and win. Maybe you've tried in the past. Maybe you've come against this giant. Maybe you've tried to defeat this challenge. But as long as you tried, as much as you tried, you have not been able to defeat him, right? And so I wonder how many people are in that situation right now that are in this room or watching online. Something that's overwhelming you. Something that's coming against you that is much bigger than you. Maybe it's your house situation, or maybe it's a relationship or your finances or your marriage or your boss or your job. Maybe it's your son or your daughter. Maybe it's in your head or in your heart. Maybe it's real and authentic, or maybe it's just made up, but it's coming against you. Whatever it is, it's overpowering you. It's intimidating you. It feels like you're overwhelmed and it feels like you're already defeated. I wonder how many people are going through a situation that you already feel defeated. You already feel that this giant that's come against you, maybe even before in the past, it's intimidating you. It's intimidating. It's scary. It's something that brings fear to you because you know it's overwhelming and it's very difficult to come against it. Well, whatever the Anakite you're facing, whether it's bigger and stronger than you, if you're facing that today, just know that that's what the children of Israel were facing. They were facing a situation that was much bigger than them, much stronger than them, that was intimidating, that was scary. They were facing a tribe of people that were literally giants. These men were 9 to 10 feet tall. They were huge, right? Incredible giants. But it wasn't just tall guys they were going to face. They were going to face a bunch of them. They were, not only were they just tall guys and huge, but they were trained warriors. These guys were trained to kill. These guys knew how to use weapons. The children of Israel were slaves. And they're going to come against these giants who have weaponry and who are trained on how to fight, how to do hand-on-hand combat. And they not only were big and huge and strong and well-equipped, but they had a reputation. They had a reputation of anybody coming to mess with them, they were going to, kill them. They were going to defeat them easily. And not only did they have all that, but they had walls protecting them. Around their city, there was walls protecting their cities. And they will destroy, they had a reputation of destroying anybody that came against them. They had giants and they knew how to fight. And lastly, they were in a fortified city that had walls that reached to the sky protecting them. And you got God here telling them, I have given you this land. I have given you them to you. That you don't have to trip. I will destroy them with fire. But in the natural, it looked crazy. It looked intimidating. It looked, there's no way. But he's saying everything that I've described to you, it is yours. This is your promised land. This is it. You're half their size, but you will overtake them. You don't know how to battle because you weren't trained that way. But these giants will be defeated. I mean, come on. Does that make logical sense? Does that make any sense at all? It doesn't. And it may seem logical that whatever situation you're facing, it's illogical. It doesn't make any sense that you will be able to overcome and you will be able to defeat. It just doesn't make sense. It looks the walls are too high. The giants are too big. And there's no way on this earth that you will be able to overcome this situation. As a matter of fact, you probably have people telling you all day long that you won't be able to overcome. You probably have the enemy whispering in your ear at this very moment that you won't be able to defeat the Anakite in your life. So what I'm going to do is fast forward several books here of the Bible. I'm going to go from Deuteronomy to Joshua, but keep like a bookmarker on Joshua because I'm going to refer to it. On Deuteronomy because I'm going to refer to it again. But I'm going to fast forward to when they face the wall and the Anakites. And so if you want to read this entire story, you would go to Deuteronomy, start at Deuteronomy, then we're jumping over to Joshua chapter 6. And we'll get to some of those details in there at a different later time. But right now, I want to look at when they were about to defeat these Anakites, when they were about to go into the city. Joshua chapter 6, verse 1. It says this, now Jericho was tightly shut up. It was tighty. It wasn't like the border in America, in Texas, right? Just let anybody in, right? It wasn't like that. No, this was tighty. This was just fortified walls. I mean, it had protection. Nobody was going to come through unless, they allowed them to come through. And so it said it was shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in, right? No one was able to come in. No one was able to go out unless they allowed it, right? But it was fortified. It was just walls. Come on, you got to understand. So not only were they going to fight against the people inside that city, but they had to get inside the city, right? And it was fortified. And I love this fact that we read in Deuteronomy that the city of Jericho and the Anakites, that it was the Anakites that had a reputation that we just read. They had a reputation that no one messed with them, right? Because of their reputation. Like back in the day, those people who had a reputation that they could fight. You know what I mean? Usually the big guy or whatever, or the guy that took judo, or the person that was just crazy, right? They had a reputation. They had a rep, right? Don't fight with them, right? I was like, I think in my elementary, I think I was like third. Maybe sometimes I was probably third. There was two guys that ahead of me, and I just knew not to fight with them, right? But the other guys, like, yeah, anybody, right? I'll come again. But there was two guys, Richard Knight and what was his name? Another one, DeSazier was his last name, Mark DeSazier. And those two guys, in fact, we were friends, right? But one time, man. Richard Knight ended up in prison, man. He was that crazy, right? But Richard Knight, I hope he's not in prison anymore. We're 50-something. Come on, hey, sometimes there's at some point you just got to get behind that stuff that used to bring you down. And so Richard Knight, one time, I got in a fight with him, right? And I was just like crazy. I don't know what I was thinking, but I got in a fight with him, and and I got the best of him. But I waited till a teacher came because I had him in a headlock, and I was squeezing the heck out of his head. I don't know why I was doing that, but I was squeezing the heck out of his head, and then so I waited till a teacher came, and then when the teacher came, I let him go. I make sure I step back because I was still afraid to fight Richard Knight. But the teacher was there, and then he just looked at me. He was crying. Richard, he's like, I'm going to get you after school. So I talked to my buddy who was like 4 years, 3, 4 years old. Well, we called him my cousin. So he went to the school too. I made sure he got word. Hey, bro, Richard Knight's going to get me after school. So you better. So he came, he protected me, and he told Richard, hey, man, you touch my cousin, you're going to be smoked, right? And so anyways, he didn't touch me. But thank God. But Richard Knight would have been able to kick my butt, I'm telling you. But because they had reputations, right? They had reputations. And that's the same thing with the Anakites. They had a rap. They had a reputation. And I love the fact that, check it out what the next verse says. Let me read verse 1 again. It says, now Jericho was shut up because, why was it shut up? Because of the Israelites. So here they are, bigger, stronger, fortified. They know how to fight. And all of a sudden, they made it, they didn't want anybody to come in, specifically the Israelites. Because you know why? Because the Israelites started to get a reputation. Don't mess with them. Not because they knew how to fight, but because they had God on their side. And so I love the fact that Jericho had to tighten it up. They had to get those gates closed, right? The Anakites had to close that gate. No one went out, and I love that fact. But now in Deuteronomy 9:2, we see that the Anakites had their reputation. But now in Deuteronomy 9, now Joshua 2, we see that, Joshua 6. I want to make sure I got it right. So now Joshua 6, we see that the Israelites now have a reputation. Don't mess with them. Don't mess with them. Why? Because they have God. And so Richard Knight didn't mess with me because I had someone backing me up, right? Someone stronger, bigger, and that could take care of Richard Knight, right? And actually, the one I call my cousin, he ended up in prison too. Actually, they ended up in prison together, those two. And I know because I went to go play softball one day, as a ministry, we would go in prisons and go play softball against prisoners. I know it's kind of crazy, right? But young men would go into men's prisons and I think it was Folsom, like big prisons, right? Go in there and it was to my shock, to my horror. So I knew Ricky was in there, my cousin, and then I went and I seen Richard. I was like, oh, he was so happy to see me. Like, oh, hey, bro, Andrew, right? That's what they call me in school. Andrew, what's up? And I was like, whoa, it was so trippy to see him. That's how I knew he ended up in prison, was because I actually seen him. He didn't play softball, but we were not touring, but we were walking to the softball field or something, so we had to go through the prison, and I seen him. Is that weird? Elementary school, I got him in a headlock. I got the best of him, but Mr. Owens came and broke us up, and I was still scared, and Ricky had to come and protect me. But I seen him in prison like when I must have been 20, so I was already married, so I must have been 25, 26 years old, and I see him, and I just, I just pray. I pray, man, that he's no longer in prison, and that God changed his life. And I pray that if you're in prison, right? You go, I'm not in prison. What are you talking about? Well, if your heart's in prison, if you're facing this Anakite and it got you in prison, it got you in bondage, I pray that this morning you're set free. Amen. That Jesus, you allow him to set you free. But all right, so the children of Israel now had a reputation, and I pray that we get a reputation. Not with people here on earth, right? Right? Oh, dude, don't mess with Pastor Gilbert. He'll kick your butt. Not that kind of reputation, right? Because I ain't trying to fight no more. I'll fight if I have to save my family, but other than that, I'm not going to fight. But anyways, so, not that kind of reputation. I'm talking about the reputation with the enemy. Come on, I'm talking about a spiritual reputation that when our eyes are closed and when we're asleep and we're about to wake up, the devil makes commotion in hell. Watch out! They're about to wake up. Come on. I'm talking about a Holy Ghost on fire Christian reputation. That's what I'm hoping and praying for. Amen? Verse 2. Let's go to verse 2. Then the Lord said to Joshua, see, and that's important, verse 2. The Lord said to Joshua, see, because you'll see many times in the Bible where the Lord will say to see, or they saw, or to look, or something of that nature. But he says, see, the Lord wanted Joshua to see that I have delivered Jericho into your hands along with its king and its fighting men. Now, this is really important to see what God sees. It's really important for us to see what God sees. And what we see is very important. The reason it took the children of Israel so long to enter their promised land was that they were seeing the wrong thing. They were looking at the wrong thing. They were focused on something that was not of the Lord, right? They were focused on their resources, on their flesh, on their ability, not on God, not on the promises that God had given them, because God had given them for hundreds of years this land. He said, this land is yours. This territory is yours. This will be yours. And God had been promising that and telling them that for hundreds of years, and especially the last 40 or 4 decades before that, he was telling them over and over, this is it, this is it, this walk into your promised land. But they couldn't, because their focus was on the wrong place. Their view was in the wrong place. Their heart was in the wrong place. And I mentioned this because if you're facing an Anakite, it's really important what you're looking at. It's important what you see. It's important what you believe. It's important what you decree. It's very important that if you're facing difficult moments, difficult times right now, it's important that you focus in the right place. Your focus is in the proper place. And what the children of Israel needed to do is they needed to focus on the word of the Lord. They needed to focus on his promises. And if they would have just seen that, the promises of God, they would have had victory. Despite the fact that they weren't qualified, despite the fact that the Anakites were bigger and better and are in terms of fighting, that they were more equipped, they